All right, folks, it is just about 10 a.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to an introduction to Clean Coast, Texas. This webinar is brought to you by the Texas General Land Office, and it's being hosted by the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University. So if you saw in your link that this was a Texas State email, that is why. My name is Leah Cuddyback, and I work for the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment in their Watershed Services Program Department. And you'll be seeing me pop up throughout this morning's workshop to launch polls, encourage folks to use the Q&A and the chat box, and to read off some of the questions that are submitted by you, our attendees. So when you see me, that means it's probably time for a question. We're going to go ahead and get started with our first poll now, so folks that are tuned in can get the hang of how these polls work. And this poll is just a general introduction. So you should see this pop up on your screen. You can go ahead and fill out whichever category best describes your role as a stakeholder in this process. I'm seeing folks' answers roll in. We're going to go ahead and leave this poll open for a couple of minutes as we get started. That gives everybody some time to answer as they get started. I know a lot of folks join Zoom webinars right when they start at 10, and right now, since it's 10:01, we've already got over 100 people in the room. We'll keep you posted as that number kind of goes up, and we'll end up being able to share some of the poll results live during the webinar. Anything that we don't get to live in this webinar, we will be sharing with all registered attendees in a follow-up email. You can go ahead and submit a little bit more about yourself. So on here, this says which category best describes your role as a stakeholder. If we go ahead to the next slide, then you'll see we also would love to have you share information about where you're coming from, who you are, a little bit of background. If you want to spread a little bit more of your own message out, you can go ahead and send it in the chat to everybody. The chat is a great place for comments, anecdotes, personal stories about what's going on in your community. And the Q&A box, which you'll also see at the bottom of the screen, is where we're going to use everybody's feedback for questions and answers that our panelists can respond to. So if you want to go ahead and submit a question at any time during this presentation, you are welcome to. Our panelists will be answering throughout via text response. And at the end of this webinar, we have time dedicated to a live question and answer session. So go ahead and submit questions as we go. We may not get to them right away, but we'll definitely answer you. And if we don't answer you live or in the chat, we will be sure to follow up via email. So all questions will be recorded, and we'll be following up verbally or in follow-up email. So thanks, folks. I think we've got a pretty large group in the room. We're at 135 participants here right now, as well as our 9 panelists. And we're gonna go ahead and give you one more minute on that poll. But I'm gonna go ahead and introduce you to our first speaker. His name is Jason Pinchback, and he's from the General Land Office. So Jason, go ahead and take it away.
Hey, Leah, thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction. And as we all get accustomed to these meetings in the virtual environment, we really appreciate the explicit instructions on using the chat and the other functions here, as we want to make this as interactive as we can with as many folks here. So I'm super excited to introduce this program to you all. Today's meeting basically will focus on the Coastal Collaborative, which is a partnership and collaboration between the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University. Next slide, please. And we'll also feature speakers from the Texas Community Watershed Partners, from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, Texas Sea Grant, Texas A&M University, and Doucette and Associates. Next slide, please. So the story of how we got here, it has been a long time in the makings. Before we get there, I just want to introduce myself formally here. My name is Jason Pinchback. I work in the Coastal Resources Division of the Texas General Land Office. And today is our formal introduction of the Clean Coast Texas program. Next slide, please. Just to kind of clear the air and set the stage here for how we got here. This really started back in the early 90s when the US Congress passed the Protecting Coastal Waters Act. And basically what this act instructed all states in the United States with a coastal management program to develop and implement measures for controlling non-point source pollution or stormwater runoff pollution, to restore and protect coastal waters, and also do this while working in close conjunction with other state and local authorities. For us here in Texas, what that did was it put the General Land Office, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, and the Texas State Soil Water Conservation Board for sharing responsibilities for managing non-point source pollution in the coastal zone. Next slide, please. So without getting too much in the weeds here, in essence, this Protecting U.S. Coastal Waters Act divided all the different types of ways that non-point source pollution or stormwater runoff pollution can make it into our receiving waters and into the coastal zone. They're here in these 6 broad categories, but these actually break into 57 separate measures. Next slide, please. Back when Texas originally started working on this initiative to gain approval from NOAA and EPA for the Coastal Non-Point Source Program, 6 agencies joined together and started networking to determine how can we meet this new measure and how can we work collaboratively to address water quality and non-point source in the coastal zone. Next slide, please. So our initial strategy on this was to look at the requirements and where we could to incorporate these specific requirements into existing programs. And so those agencies that we just had listed, all 6 of us have in effect been integrating and have integrated the measures, all except for some that focus on urban measures. So when we've gone through the analysis and approval process with NOAA and EPA, which we are still wrapping up but near the final stages, it was determined that the urban measures were not sufficiently handled by current programs. In essence, that has helped to birth, if you will, the Clean Coast Texas program. Next slide. So a couple of things that are very important for this program and to communicate. One of them is that this is not a regulatory program. This is a program that operates on voluntary and incentive-based initiatives. Other states in the United States have chosen to go through a regulatory route, and we've taken special efforts here to strategically position our resources and program efforts to focus on voluntary and incentive aspects. So with that in mind, a part of our mission here and our goals are really about providing technical resources and planning tools so that we can support local decisions. We want to improve coordination. We want to resolve problem areas. So this isn't a giant research initiative. We want to look at current and active and ongoing things that have been identified at the local level. And of course, we want to work with you all to plan and seek funding for projects. So this is all under the umbrella to support sustainable stormwater management in coastal communities, to improve water quality and flood management. Next slide, please. So with that being said, this is really all under the backdrop of, well, what drives changes in water quality? And for us in Texas, and particularly with the coastal zone, a significant factor that will be impacting water quality down the line and currently is population growth and all the associated land use changes with that. Next slide. So it doesn't take a scientist to see that, you know, over time, our footprint and how we use coastal water resources has changed. And those changes are driving different changes in our water quality. Next slide, please. Right now, the coastal zone is significantly benefits from just the facts on the ground, which basically comes from the primary land use, which is predominantly grassland, scrub, shrub, pasture, cultivated crops, and barren land. And so the ecosystem services, if you will, provided by these undeveloped areas are able to mitigate for existing and current pollutant loadings to some extent. Next slide, please. However, we do know that pending changes will be coming. It may not look like this picture here, but the footprint will be unique to the Texas coastal zone. Next slide. This program here is, it's not a go alone effort. And for folks who've been working in water quality initiatives, you probably can't find an initiative that was a go alone. And so we are nestled and coupled along with the General Land Office Coastal Resiliency Master Plan that many folks will recall is, it's been a multi-year effort and still ongoing today. Josh Oyer, the planner with that program, will be speaking with us here in just a little bit. We're also part of the Coastal Management Program here at the Texas General Land Office. And so we're well positioned within multiple different programs, and we seek to integrate into new programs as well. Next slide. looking big picture here, we have these main objectives that we're initially looking at. We want to use water quality data to improve beach conditions and to support tourism and economic development. We want to partner with local governments and where possible, assist with local planning and retrofit activities. We have technical guidance and want to provide funding assistance. And a big piece of this whole effort here is really about engaging to learn how we can have a best fit with communities. So we spent the last couple of years working with EPA, NOAA, and those networked agencies to figure out how we can get this program approved. And our pivot point right now is to really need to engage with you all to figure out how we can best serve and be a best fit for your community. And finally, where our broad target is really about the enhancement of water quality while promoting flood management. And with that being said, we're super excited. I'm just getting this conversation started. We've got some great presenters, information coming. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to attend the entire broadcast here today and participate in the Q&A due to a family emergency, but I'm very excited in following up with you. We have a great team. I'd like to thank the planning team for this from Texas State University, the Mission Aransas SNR as well, Sarah Cunningham, AgriLife Extension Texas Sea Grant, and Texas Community Watershed Partners. I'm super excited about this collaborative as we begin to launch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. We have launched our second poll at this time. So if you saw it pop up on your screen, this one is for us to know a little bit more about your community. So go ahead and submit your answers. This poll will be open for about a minute or two, let folks have the chance to respond. As we're doing that, I'm just gonna let y'all know, we've got some great folks in the room. After our last slide with the first poll, we saw we've got a number of elected officials here. Thank you for being here. I also want to thank all of the nonprofit and educational workers here. That seems like to be our biggest group. But there's also a number of engineers and technical experts in the room, city officials. Thank you for tuning in. At this time, we've got nearly 200 folks in the room, so thanks for being here. I do want to let y'all know that following one of the questions we've received, yes, the webinar will be recorded and shared at a later date. Also, if for some reason you can't tune in for the whole meeting today, you are welcome to tune in next week on Thursday, February 4th. We will be having an identical meeting to today's meeting. So if you have to leave early, you can tune in next week and get the rest of your meeting there. All right, and with no further pause, I'm going to go ahead and pass this to Nick Dornack from the Meadows Center. And he's going to start off our next section on unpacking our resources.
All right, good morning and thank you, Leah. Again, my name is Nick Dornack. I'm Director of Watershed Services at the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State University. And really, what a terrific group of people, Jason, and if you're still there, and Leah, that we have this morning, diverse people, diverse interests. I think this is exactly the audience that we were looking for when we went to work developing this program, Clean Coast Texas. So Clean Coast Texas, as Jason said, brings together the technical, educational, and structural resources Gulf Coast communities will need to protect and improve their coastal waters. But it's only a platform. This event today and those to come that we hope to bring to your community will be engaging with community leaders, stakeholders, concerned citizens. And that's where we really expect to realize the true impact of this program. All the technology and research and creativity that went into developing these resources and program areas that we're going to discuss really pale in comparison to the power of a local leader or a group of stakeholders with a passion and commitment to better your community. So we want to bring that to you. And I believe that's why we are here today. And I believe that's why you're here, to take that first step with us. And we're really grateful for your presence this morning. Having 200 folks on this webinar is fantastic. So we hope we find something that resonates with you. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for motivated communities, motivated individuals. We want to find the things that resonate with you and resonate with your community and help grow those and bring these resources to you. And to help me unpack some of these resources, We have Sharish York with Texas Community Watershed Partners and Morgan Ayers with Texas Sea Grant. These fantastic organizations have partnered with Texas State University and the GLO to create the Clean Coast Texas Collaborative, which we'll preview a little bit later in the presentation today. So Clean Coast Texas resources were developed strategically to target 6 impact areas. And these are the tools in our box. How they are utilized and brought to bear are going to be the work of our team. You've seen some of them already, and we hope to introduce the rest of our team to you today. And we're going to be working thoughtfully and intentionally with you and your community to have the greatest impact to affect those challenges that you guys are going to see and face in the 21st century. Residential resources, technical guidance, education and outreach, community planning, collaborating and connecting with coastal communities, and funding to support and turn those great ideas that you have into meaningful action. And you can access many of these resources at the Clean Coast Texas website, which is launching soon. It's not quite ready yet. We're very close. We've built this site to be easily accessible and engaging, and we hope you'll find it that way as well. As our program continues to develop, we'll be highlighting it with interactive modules and original content that can be accessed 24/7. You never know when that next great idea is going to come. So we'll be following up with you after the webinar and in the coming days with an official website launch, and hope you take some time for a deep dive into the clear coastal waters that the Clean Coast Texas website hopes to inspire. So let's take a look at some of the resources that we have put together. Coastal water protection truly does begin with you. From water smart landscapes to septic maintenance, Clean Coast Texas wants to empower coastal residents to take ownership in the protection of their critical water resources that absolutely define your communities, both culturally and economically. Well-informed city managers, county administrators, elected officials, planners, and engineers, as we know, are so critical to making the right decisions for stormwater management along the Texas coast. And technical guidance for these key decision makers is a keystone component of Clean Coast Texas. The Sustainable Stormwater Manual and other technical tools are designed with you guys in mind. And as we know, given the interconnectedness of ecosystems with water quality health and coastal community economies, it's critical to understand how land development directly affects watershed function. And to this end, Clean Coast Texas offers guidance on sustainable stormwater drainage, guidance for roads, highways, and bridges, ordinance development tools, resources, and technical modules. All of these things we hope to engage with either in an online forum, direct meetings with our communities and leaders. These are going to be supported with training workshops and direct assistance for community development, including code evaluations and revisions, project planning, and funding strategies for implementation. These are the tools we offer. These are what we would like to bring to you, and we want to connect with you and find out what's going to work best in your community. As Jason mentioned, finding that best fit is really what it's all about. And with direct engagement from our team and your community, we really want to see the Sustainable Stormwater Manual adopted by communities up and down the Texas coast. We understand water quality throughout the coastal zone varies widely. You've got pristine, high quality waters to many communities seeing waters that don't meet TCEQ standards for water quality. We've got more than 6 million people living in 18 counties up and down the Texas coast. And over the next 20, 30, 40 years, we're going to see exponential expansion of those populations. Future land development in the urbanized and rural areas are going to continue to create challenges for you guys. So we do feel that sustainable stormwater management approaches can really alleviate many of those challenges. It's our job working with you to find those resources and those pathways for healthier coastal communities working together. for strong coastal economies and clean coastal waters. We want to foster the collaborations that can offer you the resources you need most for your community, and that will enable those best fit practices that are effective and attainable. Whether it be ordinance development or assistance to develop funding strategies, that's where we want to partner with you to find that, bring the best that Clean Coast Texas has to offer to your community. And one of the best people that Clean Coast Texas has to offer is Sharis York with Texas Community Watershed Partners. So Sharis, take it away.
Thanks, Nick. I'm excited to tell you all a little bit more about the Texas Community Watershed Partners and the programs that we offer that might fit with the needs of your community. So we are part of the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, which, Nick, next slide, which has offices throughout Texas. So you might be familiar with programs such as 4-H or Master Gardeners or Master Naturalist, which I saw in the chat. We have a few Master Naturalists on the webinar today. All of these are part of Extension. Our office specifically is based in Houston, and our focus is on watershed issues and on hazards. So we work with communities all along the coast and across Texas when opportunities arise. You can see on the screen some of my colleagues, and I hope you've had the opportunity to meet some of them. So we have two main groups at TCWP, one focused on green infrastructure, and we are on the right side of the screen. And you can also see our planning team, which is on the left side of the screen. All of us work with communities and organizations to ask questions and find solutions that meet those communities' needs. So first, we'll talk a little bit about GIFT, or Green Infrastructure for Texas. Next, go. We look at green infrastructure practices across the landscape spectrum. So from small scale practices like rain gardens or swales or green roofs, up to mid-scale practices, things like constructed stormwater wetlands or green streets, all the way up to large scale protection, preservation, and restoration of natural lands. Maybe it's 100 acres or 500 acres or 1,000 acres where those tracts exist. It's important to think about green infrastructure at every level to really understand how it fits into your community and meets your goals. There is no one-size-fits-all approach to green infrastructure, so we really have to look at the diversity of practices that are available and how each of them function. So when we work directly with communities, we do things like plan workshops and presentations, we hold meetings, whatever we can do to help decision makers understand green infrastructure. We work with communities on demonstration projects, getting actual practices on the ground. What we have found is that once people see these practices in their communities, understand what they look like, how they function, they can really start to envision how these fit into the infrastructure where they live and how they can be part of their communities. And finally, whenever possible, we work to collect data on these practices so we can share the numbers and the information about how these are actually functioning and empower that community with the data and the numbers to further the conversation and help them continue to make informed decisions. So that's GIFT in a nutshell. We'll switch gears and we'll talk a little bit about our planning program. So again, the focus here is community level planning and working with decision makers to meet goals and provide data that can make informed decisions. So we have 4 main areas that I want to highlight for you today. So first up is CHARM, or Community Health and Resource Management. I'm sure some of you have probably been to a CHARM workshop in your county. We've hit a lot of the coastal counties over the last several years with workshops. So we use maps and data for an interactive workshop focused on conversations about local issues, really bringing people around the table to talk about community needs and to use the available data to help them make informed decisions. So the photo on this slide is from Hays County. We have recently made a switch to hosting virtual CHARM workshops, and we have a few of those happening this spring, but hopefully we'll get back to in-person workshops soon. So the next 2, the community technical assistance and the project identification exercises, I'm going to talk about together because both of those are types of ad hoc planning resources that TCWP offers typically for smaller communities. So we work with communities on a specific issue, or we can even help them take a vague set of issues and help identify how we can support them. So the only real criteria is that the assistance needs to have a hazard component, which can mean a lot of different things. So I want to give you a couple of examples. We recently worked with the city of Port Lavaca over several months to develop a new ordinance that incorporates higher development standards into their development code. So this involved a number of meetings to work through the process of what the city actually wanted and what they needed, and then actually help them write the ordinance that they ultimately adopted. Another community that we've worked with is Port Aransas. So in this case, TCWP staff helped develop a land disturbance permit to include protection for wetlands and sensitive habitats, as well as higher development standards in high hazard areas. And we're continuing to work with Port Aransas to develop an ordinance related to mobile home parks that includes a stormwater component. So those are just two quick examples to give you some idea of the technical assistance we're able to offer. Really, we can do just about anything from helping develop a comprehensive land use plan to helping facilitate just a handful of meetings to scope out projects for our community. And we do all of this at no cost to our community partners. Finally, I want to tell you guys about Citizen Planner. This is a training for local elected officials that is available online and also held in person when we can. What we found is that most of the people who run for office locally do so because they really care about their communities, and they often are very knowledgeable about it, but they're asked to make a lot of tough decisions that are outside of their knowledge base. So maybe they're an accountant or a business owner, and now they are now responsible for making planning decisions that will impact their community for years to come. So Citizen Planner is a course designed to give them a broad-based overview of the planning process with a focus on issues that are important to Texas. So we have a variety of instructors, from attorneys to professors to consultants, who offer a variety of backgrounds and bring a wealth of knowledge to the courses. So the website is listed here on the slide. You can register online for the course right now if you're interested, or maybe wait till after the webinar. So to wrap up, I've thrown a lot of information at you at a very short time, but hopefully you have a better feel for TCWP and how we can potentially work with your community. So if you have questions, I want to remind you that there's a Q&A section at the bottom of the screen where you can ask those now. We will have a lot of opportunities coming up this year and next year with workshops and activities as part of the Clean Coast Texas Collaborative, and I'm hoping to see a lot of you there. So I'm going to wrap up now, and I'm going to pass the mic to Morgan Ayers with Texas Sea Grant.
Good morning. Thank you, Charis. I'm Morgan Ayers with Texas Sea Grant, and I'm speaking on behalf of a team of us that are working with these partners. We have 3 planning specialists and our associate director as well, so I will include their contact information at the end. This slide just has an overview of what our mission is and the 4 focused areas that we utilize to carry out that mission, to balance the environmental and economic needs. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about Texas Sea Grant. We are a collaboration of federal, state, and universities. So on this left side, you can see nationally where different sea grants are located. And then for Texas, we are headquartered in College Station, and we work with a variety of universities and those researchers. We act as the kind of middleman between researchers and communities to identify those site-specific needs that have been mentioned previously as being really important to helping communities fit their needs and fill data gaps. Next slide, please. One of our 4 focus areas is resilient communities and economies, and we have a strategic plan that identifies specific goals within that focus area. So those are listed here, and a couple of photos included of actual projects and the way that those are accomplished. For example, the resiliency, there's lots of technical assistance, training, and then conducting applied research. And for the water resource issues, we do engage with communities for watershed education, water quality, water resource availability, and then we do watershed planning. And this photo is actually of a current project in Baffin Bay. Next slide, please. And another of the 4 focus areas is healthy coastal ecosystems. So we are the goals of that focus area are to ensure that we support the monitoring and the enhancement and restoration of those ecosystems throughout the Texas coast, as well as supporting the communities and the industry and the tourism at the same time. So that balance comes up again. And these are just photos of some existing projects where the elected officials and students are engaged. Next slide, please. And then a few specific projects that overlap with the focus areas that I've overviewed are that have to do with this larger goal of watershed protection and non-point source reduction to help meet water quality standards as different restoration practices, community planning throughout the coast. We have planners, they have a planner in the lower coast, mid coast, and upper coast that all work together, and they work with some other departments at the university to assess and support different needs through the community, long-term recovery, for example, after Hurricane Harvey, and then partnering with agencies such as Partners Today, and then other university researchers and stakeholder groups. One very specific program that's newer is a collaborative between Texas Target Communities, Texas Sea Grant, the Department of Landscape Architecture and Urban Planning, Hazard Reduction and Recovery Center, and the Institute for Sustainable Communities. So they decided to pull together all those great resources that cover different aspects of planning and utilize researchers and students and boots on the ground all together to work throughout the coast. So this is just an overview of what those different pieces look like. Next slide, please. And then the goals of that align with the overall goal today of the Partners Today, and the focus areas that I've gone over. So adoption of high quality plans, that locally defined vision is key, increased resilience, and balancing the environmental and economic needs, and then always using best management practices and science-based. Next slide, please. And then just a list of some of the tools that we use to engage communities fall under usually one of the 4 of these categories for comp plan development, actual assessment tools that resource managers and elected officials and government, any decision makers can use to go through scenarios, and then ordinance development, so more of that, the technical assistance, zoning assistance, and then also the post-disaster side of things for recovery and improving resiliency moving forward. And all of these, for example, the assessment tools are some of the partners I mentioned before were the ones that came up with this, and we support the use of it throughout the communities we work in. Next slide, please. And just to, as mentioned, this is a contact slide of the team at Texas Sea Grant, starting with the Senior Associate Director and then going through the planning specialists, Ashley Bennis, Kate DeJaneiro, and Walter Peacock, all serving from mid and lower to upper coast, and then myself. And thank you so much for your time today. And remember to use the Q&A if you have any questions. And as Leah said, if they don't get answered live today, we will be sending out some follow-up information.
Thank you, Morgan. We're going to go ahead and kick into our next poll now. So let's see, we're switching over there. Our next poll is coming up. And this one is going to be an opportunity for y'all to share whether you have any past experience participating in these workshops or working with any of these organizations in the past that have been mentioned. So while that is running, I'm going to go ahead and give everybody just a general reminder The Q&A box is not the same as our chat box. So if you're sending a question in the chat, I can't guarantee that we'll spot it. We may miss it. It's much easier if you can send that in the Q&A box, which is another option at the bottom of the screen. And that way we can be sure we're seeing them and it's not getting buried in all the rest of the chat. You're also able to minimize the poll. So if this poll is on your screen and it's distracting you and you've already answered, you can go ahead and hit that little red X in the top to make it go away. Otherwise, I'm going to keep the poll up for a couple of minutes, maybe about a minute and a half. And I'm going to give Charis the opportunity to answer a question. I know we had one in the chat, a clarification point. So Charis, if you want to hop back up here, you can clarify. I know you misspoke on one thing, and thankfully there are folks in the room that caught it.
Yes, the ordinance that we worked on was with Aransas Pass, not Port Aransas. I got excited and I said the wrong community there. So, and somebody in the chat caught that. So I really appreciate that, so we can get that information corrected.
Awesome, thanks. And while you're here, I've got one quick question. And that question is just, you gave a great amount of detail on the gift and charm workshops and how those offer some really hyper-local planning exercises. Can you point to another specific time or community where local leaders that attended one of these workshops were able to implement new plans as a result?
Well, we have one that's in process right now, because what we have found is a lot of these are not necessarily a quick turnaround. So about a year and a half ago, we actually had what we call a field day for gift, where we invited folks out to our Exploration Green Stormwater Wetland project. And we had a local council member come who was very excited about this happening in his community. And so we've had a number of conversations with him over about the last year and a half. And then this week, actually, we are on the phone with the mayor and the city manager for this community, hammering out some of the very specific ways that we can work with them. And so just because we're in a community, it doesn't always turn around quickly, but we like to continue those conversations and figure out how we can work together. So there's another example for you.
Thank you. Well, on that note, speaking about community past experience, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. So if you haven't gotten your answer in, go ahead and answer now. And we're going to pass this over to Tom Hegemeyer from Doucette & Associates.
All right, thanks, Lee, and good morning, everybody. Doucette & Associates provides engineering and planning services to our clients up and down the Texas coast. We're in Houston, Austin, San Antonio, and Gonzales. And look forward to working with you all in the future as we help devise solutions for your planning and project goals and programs. Next slide, please. In the fall of last year, Jason Pinchback and myself talked with 16 different entities, private and public sector, to get input, NGOs as well, on what are some of the challenges and opportunities in the Texas coastal region. We heard a lot of great input, a lot of challenges I'll show you here in a second. And some of the primary issues were septic system failures can be quite common in this region. There's thousands of septic systems in this coastal bend. A new development also can be challenging with new impervious cover and lack of city and local government authority to help manage that overall development process. Shoreline loss is also an issue, and then flooding, of course, is always an issue in this region. This word chart illustrates we heard a lot of different things on what's challenging, and it ranges from like small drainage problems to sea level rise, from wastewater treatment plants to on-site septic type issues. Also public safety and health in the wake of floods. Again, back to lack of authority has also been a challenge to help manage and have good, smart development. And so these are some of the challenges, and I'll share with you in the next few slides some of the solutions being implemented in this Texas coastal region. First up is failing septic systems. The Houston Galveston Area Council they are heavily involved in this program to help manage on-site septic systems in this region. They've identified that one of the key issues is unpermitted sites that are not getting maintained. For example, some of the older sites been around for many years. They're starting to float as groundwater levels rise. And so some unscrupulous contractors might just knock out the bottom of these tanks so they don't float anymore, but that sewage goes right into the ground and can affect groundwater resources. So that's a real problem. And so HGAC has helped obtain funding to then do some replacements of septic systems. doing educational outreach to also help citizens know the right way to manage their systems. And then also local governments, helping them to then have the resources stretched to do more projects and programs to get these systems retrofitted. Next slide, please. Pet waste in Corpus Christi along the seawall has been identified as a problem as people walk their dogs and they do their business on the hike and bike trail and not getting it picked up. The city's installed pet waste collection stations, also education programs. Unfortunately, sometimes the city has to go up there and clean up the poop all to themselves. And so we're trying to get away from that. So education is going to be key in helping citizens manage their dogs better when they're out hiking and biking on those trails. Next slide, please. Also in Corpus, as in many cities, is trash and litter that gets mobilized during runoff events. It can flow right to the bays and also coastal waters. It's pretty common in these cities, and so as these storm drain lines can take the water and then carry it off the streets, what the city's doing is putting in curb inlets and trash interceptors to catch the trash at the source. And then also at their pump stations to lift water out of the city, they have trash rakes to help catch it at that point as well. Again, education is the key to help people think twice before putting their trash on the ground to keep it out of our bays and waterways. The last example of some good activities taking place are in Port Aransas. As mentioned before, they've been involved in a coastal management program process the last year with stakeholders and also local government staff to look at different ways to improve their codes and criteria to manage new development and also redevelopment to keep people from building in low-lying areas and also improve stormwater quality. This process is ongoing. It could end up resulting in some new codes and criteria that can manage development, improve tourism, but also not be a burden on that community. Next slide, which might be a poll, I think, Lee, is that correct? Yes.
It sure is. So I'm popping back up to open up our next poll. And this one is our local issues. So if folks can go ahead and chime in with what local water quality issues your communities most frequently encounter, we'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're most affected by. And while those questions are rolling in, this is a great time to answer a question that we actually received via email a few days ago. And this question came from Dave Saba, who I saw is on this call today from Sargent Beach. And he asked us, are you prioritizing the areas that are continuously showing a medium or high bacteria count? And how are you isolating and fixing sources of that contamination? Now, I went and spoke to Jason about this. He unfortunately had to leave early, so I've got an answer from him. And Jason's answer is that Beachwatch is currently investigating and analyzing about 11 years worth of data to better understand and characterize beach conditions as part of their ongoing research with the Hart Research Institute in Corpus Christi. Areas that are showing more sensitivity to bacterial pollution are going to be addressed in phase 2 of that ongoing work, where sophisticated data will be used to create a sort of micro watershed protection plan to better inform solutions on a local basis. So if you're interested in learning more, this project will actually be the first feature in a Lunch and Learn series we'll be launching in March. So if you're interested, you can tune in on March 18th from 12 to 1 p.m. And no worries if you didn't catch that right now, we'll be following up on that later in the presentation and via email. Jason also asked that I stress that sustaining these kind of efforts is going to take investment, interest, and follow-up from the local community. If local decision makers are not engaged in this process, the GLO will need to move on and shift its focus to sharing resources with communities that are more engaged in following up. So if you're excited about these opportunities, we want you to reach out, and we'll be sharing a lot of contact information later. But just mentally bookmark this. If that's something that sounds exciting to you and you are a committed stakeholder in your community, we want to hear from you. And I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now, and we're going to pivot to the next presentation, which will be coming from Tom again.
Thanks, Leah, and great connection there to retrofitting. It ties back to what cities can do. And retrofitting is a long word for just saying we're trying to fix an existing problem. It's usually a stormwater or some water quality problem. Here, but it also ties to economic development, recreation, and tourism. So these things can be put in many different locations, so then they can be installed to help solve water quality, floodplain management, and shoreline issues, and also part of septic system upgrades. And retrofits should not be one-dimensional in focus. You should look at trying to solve other problems as well. Often they're shoehorned into the urban environment and around all the infrastructure, water lines, utilities, roads, parks, and residences. So that also brings the opportunity to then connect with other resources and try to stretch that program and have it do more than just say like a water quality improvement. And so that's the value of retrofits. It can bring people together in a community and solve more problems at once, and then also yield some kind of amenity as well. It's really important in the design construction process to put the right type of measure in that right location, and operations and long-term maintenance is key. It's got to function well, be easily maintained to have that performance, and then plus be accepted by the community. So part of our program is to help you all help identify these projects and do planning, and help you all acquire funding to hopefully implement some of these in your community to improve water quality and then also reduce flooding and improve resiliency in the coastal region. So these practices are being done to improve water quality, help manage the oil, metals, fertilizer, pesticides, nutrients that flow off the landscape, off the roads, off the highways, which also helps public health, and then water quality, and then reduce flooding, which also benefits habitat. And using the right kind of projects in the right area can increase recharge and help also benefit water supplies. Again, maintenance is so important. And here on the right in this photograph is a permeable pavement parking lot. In these spaces between the pavers, it can take about 50 inches per hour, even more than Hurricane Harvey. And so the water is stored down below the pavement and then released slowly after it's been filtered. So working with the Meadow Center at Texas State, we did this up in the Wimberley area with the Cypress Creek Watershed Protection Program. In downtown Wimberley, we installed a permeable pavement parking lot with a local developer. It was a public-private partnership. So by doing that, we stretched those grant dollars to put in a bigger parking lot and then manage a 1 acre area that did drain right to Cypress Creek. So doing these retrofits can make that connection and improve water quality at the same time, and then stretch those grant dollars to do more than you originally thought. Next slide, please. So before and after photograph. This is a project near a bay. And on the slide right now on the left shows the parking lot that drained right to the bay. And the city wanted to help fix that problem of oils and grease going to the water. So they put in a rain garden on the right-hand side. It's a good looking amenity, and it takes the runoff from that parking lot. It's filtered through soil, has good vegetation practices before being discharged to that receiving water body. That improves water quality and habitat in the process, and also made an amenity as part of that park. Next slide. So the schematic of rain gardens, also called bioretention. This is a shallow ponding area, about 2 feet deep typically at the most, and water flows in. It slowly infiltrates down through that soil media. It's a sandy gravel kind of mix. It has some other type of materials, so it has some good nutrient removal as well. It drains out within 2 days, and then is discharged to the receiving water body, or can infiltrate right into the ground if you're in sandy soils and you have no groundwater impacts. These are pretty common now up in the Austin region. And in this picture here on the right, it's an example of how curb cuts and having a bioretention facility can be an amenity in that parking lot that provide water quality and stormwater management benefits. Next slide. One more example of a parking lot that drained right to receiving water. It was in poor repair, as you can tell in that picture. The community then put in a bioswale. Same concept again, intercept that stormwater before it goes right to the bay, have it filtered and treated, and improve overall water quality for the habitat in that area. Again, it's a multi-purpose project, not just a parking lot project, but parking lot and water quality that benefits the local community, the habitat, and manages flow. Next slide, please. So there's ideal locations for common retrofits. They can be put anywhere if you put the right retrofit in the right location. The photograph on the left's at a library. Off the second there is a long linear bioretention rain garden in a commercial parking lot. Then we have a park area, and then even on the far right, it's a green roof. It's just grass on top of the roof to hold the stormwater volume and have less runoff. So these retrofits can be put anywhere at the right place, with again, designing with maintenance in mind. Next slide. Again, some more examples of how they can be put into the open space areas, including streets, along driveways. But the key is, again, the right BMP, the right water quality measure in the right location. At the apartment complex there on the upper right, would not put in a wet pond at that location. It'd be hard to shoehorn in, we'd have maintenance issues, but having a long linear bioretention basin with an infiltration component can be easily mowed and maintained and look nice and also fit that environment. So again, it's picking the right measure for the right location. In the lower left, it's part of a highway system, having a detention basin with a water quality component to treat the runoff from the highway before it's discharged to the receiving water. Next slide, please. Even in downtown areas, high impervious cover locations, retrofits can be installed. Upper left hand is a rainwater harvesting site where they use rainwater off the roof to help manage water supplies and meet irrigation needs. In the middle there at the top is permeable pavement again. On the far right's a bioswale. Instead of using a storm drain system and curb and gutter, using a grassy median to slow the water, infiltrate it, and then clean it. Lower left-hand side is a rain garden in a highly dense, or it's a very dense downtown area where the street drains through curb cuts to that shallow bioretention bed. Water is infiltrated, filtered, cleaned, and then discharged. On the rainwater harvesting side of things, going back, Nick, if you could. As part of our Cypress Creek project again in Wimberley, we worked with Meadow Center and some developers and golf course owners to install a 5,000 gallon rainwater tank to catch water off their golf cart barn. That water is used to clean the golf carts before they use aquifer water to then hose down the golf carts. So now it's cleaner, softer water, so they have some cleaner golf carts, and also not using water from the local water supply. We also put a rainwater tank at the park pavilion at the Blue Hole Regional Park, and that's being used for indoor plumbing to then flush toilets. So rainwater harvesting is a great tool to help meet some water needs and take the load off your water supply source. Next slide. In larger development and then in greenfields, you have a much larger area to put in larger basins like wet ponds and also detention ponds and things like that. So it's not quite as constrained typically for these larger type facilities. In these wet ponds, you get some habitat enhancement, stormwater detention as well for flood mitigation. In the far right, you can have a nice landscape pond that can be an amenity along the roadway for your community. And then lower left's in a park, which can serve as a resource and also some more playing fields for that community. And we do this quite often in the Austin area with our detention ponds. We put in baseball fields and soccer fields that have backstops and everything. So that park or that pond is then used all year round, not just for one stormwater event periodically. So it's a multi-purpose facility that has those long-term benefits for the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So buffer zones, not so much a retrofit per se, but it's a great planning tool, very simple to apply. It's essentially an area of no disturbance, no construction along the creek or offside of shoreline to protect that area and allow natural processes to work like filtration and also infiltration to slow the water, spread it, and then soak it into the ground. An important aspect of buffer zones along creeks are shown in these two photographs. At this site north of San Antonio on the left is a creek drainage way in its natural state. It was constructed, or it was changed to this big concrete channel. It's about like a 4-lane freeway on the right, about 100 feet wide. So that concrete channel took away all habitat, all function, and all water quality opportunities. It also speeds up the flood flows to the downstream residents. So having buffer zones can help keep your streams in their natural condition, let them perform their natural functions for these multitude of benefits. Next slide, please. Some examples of some retrofits and project activity in the coastal region. Port Aransas did a marina project as part of the parking lot improvements. They also put in some filter strips and permeable pavement to catch the water at the source, store it, treat it, and then manage it before it's discharged to that water body. Again, a multi-type benefit project through grants and economic development programs. Next slide. Aransas County, about 10 years ago, got a TCQ 319 watershed protection grant to do some water quality ponds, bank stabilization, habitat enhancement, and also put out a lot of great signs to illustrate to the public why these projects are being done and also their benefit. In these two slides here, you can see the creek before project and after project. Before it was eroding, discharging a lot of sediment into the water body. On the right, it's got much better habitat. It's green, it's not losing soil. We do this all the time in our watershed protection projects in San Marcos, Austin, and also in Wimberley, where we have signage out to make these demonstration projects also kind of advertise and tell the public and all of us, why they're being done, and then helps us understand what we can do in our daily lives to change our behaviors, help improve water quality, and manage stormwater. So these small demonstration projects can actually yield much bigger benefits to the local community at large and help kind of buy or then get some buy-in for your program. Next slide, please. So what works and also what to avoid, kind of do's and don'ts here on retrofits. It's important to do all your homework up front. Get your good surveys, get soils data, look at all of the natural drainage patterns to make sure you're putting the right water quality measure in that right location. You want to have good soils, good vegetation for infiltration so it doesn't pond and hold water. The photograph on the right, having clogged up outlets and no gradient, it just has standing water. So having one bad retrofit project can really hurt your program. It can become a talking point in the community and can be a disservice to your long-term water quality planning. So doing the good work up front, having it well planned, can then ensure some good long-term success and then more buy-in to do more projects like this. It can also improve aesthetics and have a good long-term look for your community. Next slide. So funding. Retrofits cost money. They can be from $5,000 to several $100,000. We found that in our projects in the areas of around Central Texas, where it's about $5,000 for like a rainwater system, but several $100,000 for a big pond. So there's many different programs and funds that are available out there that can partner with your community. We've been using TCQ 319 watershed protection grants for the watershed protection program to help do these things. This kind of project grant is a 60-40 split, where the grant brings 60% of the money and the community provides 40%. But that 40% can be creative. It can be through in-kind match, it can be through land and other resources, so it's not often cash out of pocket, but the grant can bring the cash to pay for the improvements itself. Also, there's CMP grants, like Port Aransas has right now. Coastal Resiliency Master Plan's got a good program going, and other opportunities. So in our planning process with you all, we can help identify the right grant, the right funds to augment your resources to install some projects in your community. Next slide, please. Speaking of resources, we have many new resources coming online on our new website, plus the Sustainable Stormwater Manual is hot off the press. It's a must read for 2021. It includes information on like on doing some retrofits, also planning for development. It's got a model ordinance. It's got construction phase erosion controls, and also floodplain administrator type guidance. So a whole bunch of tools are now available. We're happy to share with you. It might spur some thoughts on your part on what you'd like to do in your community. You can contact us. We can find ways to partner together to help make things happen for you all in this coastal region. Next slide, please. With that, I think it's about time for me to hand off to Leah to show more of our online toolbox information.
Yes,
thanks all very much, and please provide any kind of questions or comments in the chat. Thank you much.
Thanks, y'all. Okay, so I'm going to just wrap us up with a few more resources on retrofitting that will be accessible in the near future. This first one you're getting a sneak peek at is an online retrofitting module coming in the early spring. And this should be a great opportunity for folks that want to get continuing education credit through different organizations, whether you're a Texas Master Naturalist or you're looking for a more technological specific CEU, we're going to be working on getting that to you. We've also got some great downloadable resources that will be accessible through both the module and on our online website that is going to be launching shortly. And these give us all kinds of advice on design and maintenance for some of these features that Tom has gone over. And like I said, those will be coming soon to a new GLO site, which we anticipate to have launched and ready for your viewing in the next week. And when that happens, we'll be sharing a link. I'm going to go ahead and launch us into our next poll. This one is for you all to tell us how we can best support your community in water quality improvement efforts. I don't think all of the above is a choice, but if you want to say that, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. I also want to thank folks that have submitted their questions into the Q&A box. There is a difference between the Q&A box, and I think folks are kind of getting the hang of that now. We did have some comments in the chat that I want to address first and foremost regarding specific specific point sources of pollution along the coast. And I just want to reiterate that Clean Coast Texas, this program we've been talking about today, we are a voluntary incentive-based program focused on addressing non-point source pollution. We would love to follow up with you though. So if you send a message in the chat about specific issues of point source pollution where you can point at it and say that is a problem, please reach out to Josh Oyer and Jason Pinchback. Those are our folks that we'll be sharing contact info for later from the GLO, so that they can connect you with the appropriate channels to make your voice heard on those issues. So thank you for putting those issues in the chat and letting us see that. And we do want to follow up with you. And at this time, I'm going to go ahead and give us about 10 more seconds for this poll to wrap up. And if we can go ahead and see the next slide, I just want to share this with everybody. There are many opportunities that folks have voiced to us already. These are just some quotes of some big things that were suggested of ways for Clean Coast Texas to play a positive role in communities along the coast based on those surveys that Tom and Jason did that Tom mentioned earlier in our community outreach. So hopefully if you see something here that really resonates with you, you can feel free to send that in the chat and just say that you agree that's a big issue in your community. If you have a specific question, send that in the Q&A box. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and switch to Nick for a wrap up section and a look ahead at what's to come. And I'll be closing the poll in about 5 seconds. So get your answers in.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Let's take a look ahead. I know folks have been here for about an hour. So of course, take a second if you need to take a little stretch. We'll look ahead and get into some Q&A at the end of this webinar, which I really hope will help address some specific concerns, help clarify some of the programmatic details and resources that we've been discussing today. I know that this has been a lot of information your way. So, that's what we wanted to do today, was really show you a lot of the resources, a lot of the things that we would like to do, that we can do. But this is not the end all. We have really a strong desire to partner with communities and help you guys find these solutions, whether that's retrofits, again, ordinances, planning, all of these types of things, and then the funding to go with it. We want to provide tools for that, support for that. To that end, we want to bring you resources and human resources. We want to bring these folks, these experts that you heard speaking today, some that you didn't, our partners, to the table, to your community. And we hope to do that with a strong presence in the Texas Coastal Collaborative. We have some key goals with our partnerships and our collaboration to restore coastal natural resources, improve water quality, and really find that balance between protection of those coastal resources and the public use of those resources. We know that that's so important to the economy of your coastal communities, and getting folks out on the water, getting them to appreciate these things, I think will go a long way to developing the kind of support and political will and the economic drivers to see these water quality protection programs come to fruition. Again, these are some of the big goals, but we want to work with you to identify those goals in your community specifically. To that end, we are going to be continuing to build a network of partners. We want to bring folks together from up and down the coast, maybe even from outside of Texas, that can share their experiences, their know-how with your community. We know there are a lot of communities out there with varying levels of funds and expertise, particularly a lot of these developing communities, maybe the non-MS4 communities out there that we have on the call today. The support that we found is really needed in those communities because they're addressing a lot of big city issues, but they don't have big city money and big city resources. And that's what we try to bridge that gap and help you achieve your goals for your coastal goals, and cleaner beaches, cleaner waters, recreational goals, healthy fisheries. All of these things we want to bring together, and we're going to do this with our website, the online modules. One of the things we have planned for the next several months in 2021 will be connecting with 4 communities in the coastal zone. We're going to be reaching out to communities up and down to find 4 communities that are highly motivated. We're looking for some motivated mayors, some motivated county commissioners, city council members, county judges, NGO groups that have some function and strategic ability to see some of these projects come to fruition. So we want to sit down with 4 communities and have a forum with you, develop some action plans that you can then take and work from, and provide follow-up resources with those communities, whether that's engineering resources from Tom and his group, planning resources from Morgan and Texas Sea Grant, bringing those wonderful workshops that AgriLife can bring for planning, gift, charm, and the like. So these are all programs that we want to be able to bring to you and help you sort out and find those keys. We know we're not going to get it all sorted out on an hour or an hour and a half call today. So this is really just an introduction to everything coming up. We want you to dream big and think big. Think about where these programs can help you. One of the ways we're doing that, and Leah mentioned, are the Lunch and Learns, which are coming up. And a reminder, the first Lunch and Learn with Heart Research Institute will be March 18th from 12 to 1 p.m. And we will be following up with you for how you can tune in and follow that, as well as other Lunch and Learn opportunities. We look to have those once a month in 2021. And hopefully this will be transitioning to more in-person and face-to-face meetings and engagements as well. I think that's so important for now. It's great to be able to speak to so many people, be in so many different places at once. But we know the value of relationship building and trust building with your community. So that's what we're really going to be focused on. And that's really the core of Clean Coast Texas. I think it's a different kind of beast. It's not, a typical big bureaucratic program. What we want to do is have these personal connections with the communities that we're working with, so that we can really get down to business with you and achieve those things that your citizens desire, that your constituents desire. Bring home some big wins for the coast with Clean Coast Texas. And it really starts now. This is it. This is our kickoff. Let's start the conversation and identify some of these mutual goals. And I'm going to to do that, I'm going to turn it back over to Leah, and then we'll get into some of our question and answers. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in today. Please remember to put some any questions you have for the group in the Q&A section. We'll get to those. If not, during the webinar, we will follow up with you directly. And I really appreciate everybody's attention, the great conversation going on in the chat. So thank you so much for joining us today. And Leah, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to go ahead and share the results of our poll number 5 so folks can kind of see what others responded to in terms of how we could best support. And while you guys are looking at that, I'm going to remind our panelists that they can go in and answer some of those Q&A by clicking the blue type answer button. And that will hopefully cut down on some of the questions. We've got a ton. Thank you, everybody that has submitted a question into the Q&A box. So I'm here to just remind folks that we will be following up with you today. You should get a follow-up survey right after the webinar that gives you a link to give us some response on how you felt this webinar worked, what you liked, what you didn't like. And in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be following up with you more. We'll be sharing the results of the Zoom polls that we've had going on throughout the day. We're also going to be sharing a webinar recording. And like we mentioned earlier, this is the first of 2 identical webinars. So our next webinar will be Thursday, the 4th, next week. So if you have a colleague that you think needs to know some of this information as well, we highly recommend you share that information. All login information links, they will be the same as what you use to access today's webinar. But if you've been here for the whole meeting, you don't need to watch the second one. It will be the same as what you saw today. We'll be following up and sharing some relevant tools and resources via email in the upcoming weeks, as well as links to our Lunch and Learn opportunities. So now is a great time, if you don't already subscribe to our mailing list, for you to do that. You can go to bit.ly/ in all caps, CCTE, and then lowercase mail. And that will give you the opportunity to go in and sign up for our mailing list. You'll see that takes you to a Meadows Center website. You're in the right place. Meadows Center is helping GLO to manage these communications. Our main point of contact to refer you all to is Jason Pinchback with the General Land Office. Jason oversees all of this coastal stuff we've talked about today. So I'm grateful that he was here this morning, but he is not here at this time, and he's still anxious for any questions or comments to be sent his way. So once you want to follow up, feel free to reach out to Jason directly. I'm going to go ahead and close out this poll now. So hopefully y'all got the chance to see it. Looks like funding strategies is our winning one in terms of what folks think they need for more support in their efforts. And on that note, Nick, can you switch us up one more slide? I've shared our poll opportunities. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Josh Oyer. He is another representative from the General Land Office. He's a coastal planner, and hopefully he can answer some of the questions that you may want to ask Jason. So go ahead, Josh, we'll let you talk.
Hey everyone, as Leah said, my name is Josh Oyer. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of folks along the coast in my time with the GLO. I'm looking forward to continuing to make contacts. I work with the GLO coordinating the Texas Coastal Resiliency Master Plan, which is the GLO's ongoing long-term vision to protect our state's coastal communities and habitats through a range of solutions and projects that range from nature-based to infrastructure-based to non-structural projects that work to restore, enhance, and protect our coastal area. And the Clean Coast Texas program operates within the GLO's Resiliency Master Plan umbrella, provides action towards upland watershed planning initiatives, and the program will continue to assist the master planning process by identifying vital projects that build resiliency one site at a time. The formation of this program provides a great opportunity for our larger resiliency master plan efforts at the GLO to continue to grow and work closely with communities to ensure the waters flowing into our bays and estuaries are safe for our citizens and nourishing to our habitats. And of course, the key to shaping a resilient landscape today for the future is by finding projects that offer the many co-benefits between pollution reduction and flood abatement that can be realized if we continue to work together, think outside the box, and look into the future. So please reach out to me at my email address there, joshua.oyer@glo.texas.gov, if you have questions about the Resiliency Master Plan, but I'll be here for the Q&A session as well, and looking forward to continuing to engage with you folks. So thanks for having me.
All right, thank you, Josh, for that quick rundown. We're gonna go ahead and have all of our panelists turn on their cameras and sound so that everybody will be visible for this last round of question and answer. And we've got a good number of questions that have been submitted through the Q&A box. I can't promise that we'll get to all of them today, but questions that are not answered on the webinar will be followed up via email. And let's see, we've got folks here. Nick, if you want to go ahead and close out the screen share, we can just see everybody's faces, and that'll make it a little bit easier to see our little panel. All right, folks. So let's kick off with a question that I know we've gotten a few times in the Q&A, and that was how individual residents can help. I know we've got a handful of residents and landowners that are on this call right now, and I think a general response and what you can do in your community to support coastal clean water and flood management.
Sure, I guess I could take that one, Leah. Well, again, it is really encouraging to see so many concerned citizens and individuals on this webinar today. But you know, engaging with your local elected leaders is just a tremendous way to make these issues known. You know, going to those city council meetings, those county commissioner meetings. Again, I think Charis made a great point earlier in the webinar. Elected officials, local elected officials are there because they care about their community and they want to hear from you and find out what the folks really need. So voicing those concerns, those desires, the ability to, or the willingness to volunteer for a board, a zoning board, getting involved in those local planning efforts can be such a tremendous way to do it. Also, as I highlighted earlier, we have a lot of resources for homeowners and landowners to do things and lead your neighbors, lead your homeowners association, your property owners association, you know, your neighbors down the road. If they see you installing a rainwater tank or putting in a new landscape, they're going to take notice. Seeing these things on the ground, seeing these things in action really helps move the ball forward. I think that's so important on these demonstration projects that Tom highlighted. Seeing those in the community gets people familiar with them and understands we can do this, we can maintain it, we can see those benefits in real time, and it's very possible. So that's where we want to bring in, you know, our volunteer leaders, our NGOs as well, to help, you know, really get that message out that this is something that is working, that we can do. It is not an impossible problem. And we've got a lot of great people and a lot of great resources to help you do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. Now we're going to go ahead and switch to another question. Let's see. Our next one is actually going to be a general question about funding. It looked like funding was the narrow winner of that poll in terms of how we could most help. And it seems like the interest level is there. So who can give us a big picture response on how funding, access, or assistance can be provided by Clean Coast Texas?
Josh, you want to take that one, or would you like me to just hit the high points?
Yeah, Nick, if you want to hit the high points, I can jump in afterwards. Okay,
that's great. Well, I had a feeling that this was going to be a very, you know, high priority for folks. So, you know, that's something that we have really looked at, how we can help communities get those fundings and get that funding and navigate the funding world. There are so many different programs out there, grant programs, loan programs. That is why, you know, we have a lot of partners in this project to help bring some of those to light and help you in your community find the best funding program for you. One of the tools that we have that we plan to engage this year is one target community that we're going to select we're going to actually sit down with you and help you develop a strategic funding program to achieve the goals for your community that align with Clean Coast Texas. So one community is going to be getting a whole lot of extra support. We're going to be working with you to find out the best community to do that. Again, this is why it's really important for you to reach out to us if you have those interests, but we'll also be reaching out to you. But I know it can be confusing and complicated. Application writing, research to do all of this stuff. This is what we do. You know, I know that some of the folks here are working off of tax dollars. At Meadows, we work off of soft money. So finding philanthropic dollars, grant dollars, those are really important. And we have a great team here to help your community navigate that funding world. So on that note, let's let Josh talk about a couple of programs we were discussing yesterday.
Yeah, Nick, thanks for that answer, you know, for the very program specific answer and how this program is going to address funding assistance directly. But through the Resiliency Master Plan, essentially what we're seeking to do as we continue to grow the process and the reach of the plan is, you know, the way that I sort of envision it in my mind is the Resiliency Master Plan is a platform to elevate the issues along the coast and some of the solutions that we see as to be most effective. And you know, we communicate that to state, local, and federal or national audiences. In tandem with that, you know, it's not only a platform to raise awareness, but it's a funnel mechanism to try to find projects out there that need funding and then find the appropriate funding source that can be applied to and proposed to. So, you know, we're putting together a exhaustive funding list for the coastal zone with all different types of projects, not just water quality and flood type projects, but projects for more out in the bays, you know, more for habitat restoration type projects as well. So we're putting together a process to really help different project proponents find appropriate sources, you know. So when we talk about co-benefits, we can look for the hazard mitigation type funding sources, or we can look for more of the environmental or habitat funding sources. So, you know, we've got funding sources at the federal level with FEMA. Their new BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure for Communities, is really interesting. It's in its first year, and it's looking for, you know, green projects with co-benefits that help with, of course, disaster reduction, but also trying to find those environmental benefits as well. You know, there's the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation that has a National Coastal Resilience Fund that funds projects that reduce impacts of flooding, but also enhance habitats. There are funding programs at the GLO directly. We have our coastal management program. We've got on the disaster recovery side of our agency, there's the Community Development Block Grant Mitigation Fund, which is open right now. There were a round of competitions that recently closed, but they will be opening another round soon. And so these types of projects that we're talking about here on the phone or on this call today are the kinds of projects that we would like to promote to apply to those types of programs. So those are just a few right now, but I'll be working with Clean Coast Texas program and Jason very closely over the coming years to try to find the best ways to identify the right funding source to go after.
Thank you for that. I know, Brian, you popped up. Did you have something else to add? Brian is another employee of the General Land Office, and it looks like he may be frozen. So pending no response, we're going to go ahead and move forward. We've gotten a number of questions in the chat or in the Q&A box regarding desalination plants. And one question that I think we should be able to answer now regards Holiday Beach and Lamar on the Lamar Peninsula. They have a ton of open culverts. Oh, this is not the same question. Sorry, guys. That feed directly into Capano Bay and St. Charles Bay. I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly. I'm not originally from Texas. Has any panelist worked with these areas in the past and identified any problems and solutions?
It's Tom Hagemeyer here. I think maybe we should get more information on this situation and then kind of bring it into overall consideration of projects and areas and programs in this coastal region. I'm not familiar with it, but I do know there's a lot of industrial type activity along the Texas coast. So that could include, good stormwater practices, plus also water quality in the industrial process. So if those people can contact us directly, or if they could leave us contact information so we can reach out to them, we can then get more information, I think, provide the overall right connection to help start developing the right solutions for that situation, or at least be able to help and I think better analyze what's going on in the coastal region and how it might impact water quality.
Thank you for that, Tom. I am also realizing, so we've had numerous submissions of a handful of questions and answers, and there was another question from the same asker. Thank you, Robert Rich, for submitting your questions in this Q&A box. So I'm sorry I misspoke. I started to read the wrong question. I was going to ask also, are there any plans by any organization on this call to monitor water quality in Port Aransas with the upcoming construction of the Harbor Island Desalination Plant and its direct discharge into the ship channels? Now, I know I said earlier that we're focused more on non-point source pollution, and this would be an example of point source, but as the flag has been raised, this is still a water quality issue, and water quality is the name of our game. So let's go ahead and answer this one as well.
Well, I think whenever we're, dealing in these programs that really focus on, stormwater and watershed protection, the bulk of our efforts go there, but we acknowledge the real impact that point sources can have on the health of these communities, of these watersheds and the bays. We have, I think, a great opportunity to give citizens and give concerned citizens and give local leaders a platform to have dialogue about these types of issues. We also have at our disposal a tremendous amount of data and data collection that could go into this with Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, Clean Rivers Program data that could be analyzed and broken down and look at impacts over time on issues like this where point sources do play a big role. So again, while that's not the primary focus of Clean Coast Texas, we realize that point sources are going to be important components of overall plans for protecting water quality in coastal communities. So I appreciate people asking those questions and bringing up those concerns. We definitely want to know about that. If we're blind to those point sources or those issues that you're seeing, maybe you're smelling, it's not going to be productive. So we really need to know the full big picture of what's going on and find out the best places for us to help and the best places to point you to if our group can't do it. And that's why we have partnerships and collaborations with lots of state agencies, lots of NGOs that can help you. So we want to point folks in the right direction. And Leah, I noticed one other question on plastic pollution. I was wondering if I could catch that real quick. There was a question about are there any organizations addressing plastic pollution. And one group that I didn't get to mention earlier in the presentation, but that's going to be a big part of Clean Coast Texas and the Coastal Collaborative is Texas Stream Team, which is our army of citizen scientists across the state. And we've been doing work with Nurdle Patrol to quantify and highlight the impacts of plastic pollution. I know I've heard a lot about it in the news lately. We see that being a big problem. So plastic pollution is absolutely on our radar. I encourage you to check out Texas Stream Team if you have any concerns that you're seeing, because we want to offer training for folks. We want to get you engaged with your local Stream Team volunteers. There's no way that technical experts and scientists can cover the state of Texas, and that's where Texas Stream Team comes in to have this tremendous army of citizens that are trained to acknowledge water quality impacts from all of these types of issues. So thank you for that question.
Then Leah, back to desalination plants real quickly. During construction, it is a non-point source issue. So there could be construction erosion controls and after construction as well. Yeah. So our Sustainable Stormwater Solutions Manual can play, I think, a big role in helping guide designers, contractors, and regulators in using the right tools to manage construction and also post-construction. Thanks.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here on the desalination plant comment and questions. Even though the GLO is not the point source regulator along the Texas coast, we absolutely want to use this platform to listen to citizen concerns, and as Nick said, point you in the absolute appropriate direction to make your concerns heard and to give you traction to absolutely have that be heard through the appropriate channel and to the agency that can directly respond to your concern. So we absolutely will be coming together to understand the best place to point everyone in, but from the GLO side, just let you know we will continue to engage you on the subject.
Thank you for that, Josh. And we are right at time. It's 11:30 now, and we said we'd be wrapping up our workshop right now. So I know we didn't get to quite all of the questions. That's okay. We'll be responding to these after the workshop. Everything is being saved, recorded, and will be responded to in follow-up communication shortly. So thank you all for your time. I want to go ahead and let every speaker get the chance to maybe plug their organization's website right now or a way to follow up, and then we'll go ahead and say goodbye. So let's see, let's start with Charis. I know Morgan dropped off the call. So Charis, where should folks go if they want to learn more?
I'm going to send you to agrilife.org/gift for the green infrastructure or communitycharm.org for the planning side.
Thank you. Tom, how about you?
So for us, I think we'll defer to our new website, Clean Coast Texas, when it comes live. It'll connect all of our resources, and also planning documents. So stay tuned for Clean Coast Texas when it goes live. Thanks.
Thanks. And Charis has gone ahead and shared some of those links in the chat. So if you're still on here, you can copy and paste and save those. We will be following up after the meeting. Nick, did you have any final notes? Looks like.
Boy, sometimes it's hard to unmute. No, just thanks again for all the interest and questions, and look forward to following up with you after this. And like Tom said, be sure to be looking and check out Clean Coast Texas here in the very near future. Thank you.
Yes, and Cynthia Lyle, many know her as Cindy, she has shared a message to our panelists in the chat that you can see. Texas Sea Grant is also accessible at texasseagrant.org. Cindy's a co-worker of Morgan, so thank you again to all of our presenters today. Josh, thank you for hopping in right at the end and answering some additional questions from the GLO view. And thanks to all of our attendees for making time this morning. We'll be following up with a link to a survey. And otherwise, you can stay tuned for more updates from us by subscribing to our email list, which will be included in that email that goes out with the survey link. Thanks so much, y'all. We'll go ahead and leave the webinar running for just a minute in case any panelists want to respond to questions in the Q&A via chat. Otherwise, everybody's free to go. And our panelists can go ahead and turn off cameras at this point while they respond to questions. No pressure to keep those on. Thank you.